America. We're almost at the weekend. These are the four things you need to know before you get to the weekend this afternoon. It is September 26th, Friday. Thank goodness. Up first, although it is something we talked about on the show, you do need to know that James Comey's been indicted. And the case, frankly, is a genuine mess. In fact, Comey can probably get this case thrown out in a pretrial motion. Why? First of all, there's a dispute as to whether the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia is actually the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. The original U.S. Attorney lapsed in the time needed to be there because their tenure expired based on an appointment prior to confirmation. The president confirmed that person or moved to have that person confirmed by the Senate, then fired that person. The district court then appointed someone else. And then the president decided to put someone else into the role. But there's a memo from the Department of Justice from the 1980s authored by Sam Alito saying that once a presidential appointment expires after 120 days, it is on the district court to appoint the U.S. attorney as an acting position until the president moves to confirm someone. The whole thing with the appointment is a mess. On top of that, the indictment is a mess. There's actually credible reporting from within the FBI that Andrew McCabe was the leaker and lied that James Comey authorized it. There's also reporting that James Comey himself leaked to individuals and he lied to Congress. The prosecution for lying to Congress is legitimate, but there actually are all sorts of conflicts into who actually did it. On top of that, the president himself has made indicting James Comey a big deal, including through a series of tweets. And we do have long-standing body of precedent in the United States that if the president is bringing political pressure to bear publicly to get an indictment, well, we don't tend to indict those people and they can be thrown out in court. Between the appointment of the U.S. attorney to the actual charges to the president's tweets, Comey can probably get this thing thrown out of court. It was a mess from the Pam Bondi Justice Department. Up next, Sinclair has decided they'll bring Jimmy Kimmel back. Sinclair is the largest owner of ABC affiliates in the country. They spread coast to coast. Jimmy Kimmel has not been on their stations. They've been in a dispute with Disney ABC, which actually does have legal ground to sue Sinclair for not running the content. So Sinclair is now backing down. They say what they did had nothing to do with Brendan Carr or pressure from the Trump administration. They believed it was the right thing to do, and now that Kimmel has come back and did offer somewhat of an apology, they'll put him back on television. Again, however, despite the boon for Kimmel as he's come back, his ratings overall are down pretty significantly over the last number of years, and he's probably a dead man walking, frankly, when it comes to his ratings and ABC's willingness to offer him a new contract. President Trump has told Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine that he's willing to provide long-range weapons. Now, we have contingents on what the Ukrainians can do with long-range weapons, where they're allowed to fire them, how they're allowed to use them. We have a number of extraneous requirements put in place by the Biden administration, upped by the Trump administration, on how the Ukrainians can use U.S.-manufactured weapons. The president has no intention of getting rid of those parameters. However, the Ukrainians have occasionally fired long-range weapons into Russia with our consent, targeting oil refineries and weapons, munitions depots and runways for the military, things like that. The president seems willing to allow Zelensky to have those weapons, which would escalate the situation, but also allow the Ukrainians to target the Russians more effectively before they cross the border into Ukraine. Lastly, Clarence Thomas has caused a panic among the left because in a speech to Catholic University, he signaled the Supreme Court, when it comes back into session in another week, should be more open to reviewing bad precedents. This comes on the heels of the U.S. Supreme Court looking like it's going to take the case on the Federal Reserve and Lisa Cook and whether the president has power to oust her for cause. The case precedent is Humphrey's executor, which involved ousting a member of the Federal Trade Commission back during the 1930s. The Supreme Court ruled that if an independent agency set up by Congress but appointed by the president is completely independent, the president can't remove those people. Over time, however, the Supreme Court has noted how more and more of these independent entities operate as arms for various presidents' agenda based on who gets appointed and how they're operated, undermining the case for Humphrey's executor. The Federal Reserve is really about the only entity left that kind of maintains Humphrey's executors' independent stance of independent operations outside the sphere and influence of the president. But, it's a big but, the Federal Reserve operates within the precedent of Humphrey's executor. Some members of the Supreme Court have signaled they want to protect the Federal Reserve while getting rid of Humphrey's executor. Elena Kagan, in a dissent last year, suggested the logic goes one way or the other. It can't be split. Clarence Thomas signaling the Supreme Court should be open to reviewing bad precedents, hints where the Supreme Court is probably headed. Why? Because Clarence Thomas has a lot of clout among the 6 conservatives on the court, although Amy Coney Barrett, Brett Kavanaugh, and John Roberts continue to be swing votes. We'll see how this plays out. The Supreme Court begins meeting next week. They've got some very big cases on executive power coming up between tariffs, which will be heard in November, the Federal Trade Commission case, which will be heard in December, and also what to do with the Federal Reserve. These are the 4 things you need to know before you get home from work this afternoon and start your weekend. It's a great weekend for sports in America between college football, the NFL, and the Ryder Cup. Sit down, watch some sports. Don't think about politics. Make a decision tomorrow to go to church on Sunday. You'll be better off if you did. I'm Erick Erickson. Please stay informed, stay engaged, and as always, please keep the faith.